In this lesson, I'm going to place or paste an Illustrator file, which is a house, and then we're going to use the paint bucket tool and also the pattern stamp tool to do coloring of the house. Let's get started. The first thing I want to do is make sure all of this is in a folder, so then it doesn't have to have a long list of looking everything. So click once to select that top layer, hold down the Shift key, and everything gets selected. Then we're going to click on that folder and we're going to name that landscape. Now this is our original landscape PSD file, so we know that we're going to rename it under the new name based on what we're bringing in. So I'm over here, I have this vector house. I'm going to start with this one. It's called parent house. I'm going to do a command copy or edit copy. Go back to Illustrator, or from Illustrator, go back to Photoshop, and you could do a command V for paste, and then we're going to have it as a smart object. Now, again, the bounding box is around there. It's basically in free transform, so we can move it around, scale it, and if you want to proportionally scale it, if you're in version 2019, you do not have to hold down the Shift key. If you're at 2018 version of Photoshop, you do want to hold down the Shift key while you're scaling so it's proportionally scaled. Now to apply this free transform bounding box, just double click and it will apply. I'm going to name that Vector Smart Object. Parent House Vector. If you notice when we zoom in, there's a bit of a grayish, it's not very black. But in Illustrator, I know it is black. If we take a look at the black that was used for this, it is a CMYK. K means black, 100%. So that's accurate. Illustrator is CMYK. When we place that into Photoshop, which is RGB, it is reading that black and changes it slightly. So we need to modify that so it easily turns into a regular black. There's several ways to do that. The easiest way is just to move that layer mode into multiple. And now we have a nice black. I'm going to rename this layer because we do not want this to have any houses on our original landscape PSD. File, Save As, and you're going to find a folder and name that. And I am going to add a V1 in case I want to do additional versions. It is format as Photoshop. I already had an old file there, so I'm replacing mine. Now, it's going to be easier visually if you turn off your landscape, so you just focus on the actual house. If you are not easily distracted with the checkerboard, if you are, then you can just create a new layer temporarily and then fill that white. And then you can lock that layer, and then that'll give you that illusion, or it tells you, helps you with to see that black house stand out. Or you can just work as is like this. I'm going to work with just like this, our transparency checkerboard background and the vector. I'm going to lock that landscape, turn it off, and I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to do solid colors. I'm going to name that solid colors because that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to arrange the solid color layer to be between the parent house vector, get that locked, and the house color. So you want to lock anything that you do not want to accidentally apply any colors or textures to. So obviously we don't want anything to mess with the landscape, and we don't want to mess with the parent house vector. While I'm in the solid color, I'm going to zoom in, and you can easily find an area that you'd like to use. We're going to use that paint bucket. Now before we get started, you can also just select areas that you would like to start coloring first. When you use the magic wand or the quick selection to make any selection, in order to read this black, you have to have sample all layers. If you did not have this checked, it would not read this as the black and the barriers and the edges here on the house. The same goes with the quick selection. You want to make sure you have sample all layers checked in order to be able to select and read that black. Now the paint bucket that we're going to use, which is defaults underneath the gradient tool, you're going to make sure also it says all layers is checked. All layers is checked. The first thing I'm going to do is decide on a color. So the window in this area, I'm going to pick a light yellow, and I'm just going to click. Zoom in, because sometimes that paint bucket doesn't reach the black edges, and we don't want that. We want to reach that. So I'm going to click again, and it kind of bleeds out. Now with the paint bucket, you do not have to use the magic wand. You don't have to click here and then go to the paint bucket. If you notice, it actually ends up creating more of unevenness. So again, you want to just click the area with the paint bucket with no selection, because it already knows where it needs to fill. So little clicks there. And then you can pick a different color. And as you can see, I'm clicking several times in the same area so it can really reach the black. And now I'm going to do a white picket fence. You need to zoom in. You can also use your paintbrush. If you want to use your paintbrush, keep in mind what kind of brush do you want. Do you want to have feather edges, or do you want to have a hard brush? Ideally, the hard brush is going to have all the color coming out, and you could just paint. Now for me, I'm not the best painter, and I worry that I might mess up. It's easily to fix that, right? If you go somewhere that you're not supposed to, the eraser tool, you just erase and remove. Then right here and here. All right. I have some white fence, the window decor, and that would be for solid colors. Command S to save. Now when you do any more coloring, whether it's solid or with textures, you really want to organize it where you can utilize the layers hierarchy relationship. You'll see as we add on more. So the next thing I want to do is a new layer, and you can name it depending on, you can say I'm going to work on the roof, I'm going to work on the chimney, you're going to work on the door, you can say the wall, windows, but I'm going to do it based on the textures that I'm going to use. So I'm going to call this wood. Now when it comes to the pattern stamp tool, you already hopefully made all of the additional patterns that you want. And it is a brush. So again, you need to go here to decide hard brush, feathered brush, but ideally it's probably hard. And you can just start brushing and painting. To me, that takes a little more time and patience. So I'm going to utilize my selection tools, and there's multiple ways of selecting. I'm going to use the poly lasso. And don't worry if your selection isn't that great for whatever reason. You know you can add So I am selecting right now, making sure the running ants are going around to where I want to apply that wood texture. Now I made some mistakes, not a problem. I know I need to add that to my selection, so I hold down the shift key to get a plus. I click and I start adding to that, but I let go of the shift key because it knows that I'm adding to that selection. And wherever you start your selection is where you should end. You should get that little circle. If you don't, you can force it by hitting the command key, and that will force it closed. So again, I'm going to hold down the shift key temporarily. Now I have that plus. As soon as I have that plus, I let go of the shift key, and then I add to my selection. And you can do the same as subtracting. I don't want that little area, so I'm going to hold down the option key. I let go of the option key as soon as I start moving with that new selection of subtracting, and then I close it. So now I have everything that I want that wood texture to apply to. What's nice about this acts like a barrier. So now if I just increase my brush size, I just paint away. So now with the wood texture, you're like, well, I'm going to have to cut that out, the doorknob, because I don't want the door handle to be wood. You can erase that. You can use an eraser tool, it's not a problem. Or you can select that doorknob, right? We can select it. And then we're going to hit delete. So that could subtract it as well. I'm going to undo that. So the layer arrangement could also help you with things. If I move the wood layer to be below the solid color, I could then just pick gold for now. Then when I'm in the solid color, and I'm doing a couple of clicks, it hides over that wood panel. So arranging your layers around will help as well, so you don't have to do a lot of selecting and deleting, because overlapping these will easily hide anything that's not supposed to be seen. Let's jump forward a little bit. I want to show you another help with the selecting. I've created a layer called slate, and I am going to apply a rock slate onto certain areas. I'm going to turn off just so I can see the original vector. That will help me be able to select the areas I want. And I'm going to zoom in. And again, if I just want to add, I could just circle that, and I'm holding down the shift key. Now, sometimes you get that edge that you don't want. You want that all the way to the black. So one way to expand your selection, you would go to Select, Modify, Expand, and you can decide how many pixels. So we're just going to go with 2 pixels, and then it goes past a little bit, so when we use that slate texture, we have to turn it back on. And you're going to decide how you would like your coloring of your house to look. As you can see, I have right here the solid colors into one layer. I have the slate into another, stucco, plaster. Remember to save your work, Command S. Now the only thing remaining is deciding what texture I want to add down here and for the windows. So I'm going to go closer in, use my poly, and then I'm going to add to that selection. I'm holding down the Shift key. I get that little plus. I'm going to let go of the Shift key. You can use the lasso tool or any other selection tool that you find easier. Hold down the Command key if you want to force it to close there. Both those areas are selected. Go with a brick. I can increase my brush. Command S to save your work. Now this is not done. You don't want the house to look like a prop house, right? We shouldn't see the whole background between your windows. One solution is New Layer, Windows, and I'm going to use the Gradient tool. Now the Gradient tool does immediately show some gradient colors, whatever you have in the foreground and background here, and I'm going to hold down the paint bucket and go to Gradient tool. It reflects that information up here, but you don't have to use the colors you've chosen if you'd like to use something else. I'm going to change right here, open up the gear and go to the metals, and I'm going to not replace, I want to add. So I'm going to click on Append. I'm going to click on this one. Now it's going to be in different ways of the gradient. So these will show you the different ways, and this one I like more. And I'm going to just make in the window layer, a box with my selection, right, a rectangle. And then with the gradient, I'm just going to go in there, make sure I'm out of the gradient, go back to the selection tool, go around there, click on the gradient, and then I'm going to do another one right up here. Again, selection, go to the gradient, and then depending on the direction, is that what you like? Then from there, we're going to move that layer all the way to the bottom because I have the wood to cover that. And if you'd like, you can even change the opacity a little bit just to give it, you know, see-throughness. And there you have all organized. You make sure that this is locked, the vector, the parent, and we made sure that it's a true black because we had that in multiple mode. This is normal mode. And you're going to rearrange these to make sense for you to give you the end result you need. Remember to save your work, Command S.